Hi, my name is Jenny and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'll be talking about how I passed the NCLEX on my first try. The top 3 resources I used to study was and Before going into talking about how I studied for the NCLEX, I wanted to briefly mention the process of getting your ATT number. A little bit about me, I went to school in Boston to study nursing, and because I wanted to be registered as a nurse here in New York, that means I was applying as an out-of-state grad. My nursing school said that they were going to wait until the end of the month of my graduation date to send my transcripts. Because I graduated in December of 2020, I submitted my application January 7th, and I didn't get my ATT number until March 4th. So from the date that I submitted my application to the date that I received my ATT number, it took exactly 7 weeks. I'll put the link to the homepage website of that department down below. So let's jump right into my study resources for the NCLEX. So the top 3 resources I used was UWorld, Notion, and Klimek. I also used a few YouTube videos from Registered Nurse RN and Simple Nursing for some of their videos, and I also used some assessment tests from Nurse Achieve. At first I wanted to approach my NCLEX studying really rigorously because I wanted to finish really fast. But as soon as I realized that my ATT number was going to take a long time, I took a more lax approach. So I ended up studying about 2 months of low intensity and 3 weeks of high intensity. During the 2 months of low intensity, it averaged out to 3 to 5 days a week, and every single study session was about 2 to 4 hours. Each study session I aimed to do about 50 questions a day, so I broke that down to doing 25 questions a time. And during the 3 weeks of high intensity, I studied 6 days a week, anywhere from 6 to 9 hours a day. So with each day of my high intensity studying, I would aim to answer about 75 questions, and I broke them down by topic. How I use UWorld. So when you enter UWorld, you will be able to select your questions by topics. So I know some people like to randomize all the questions, but I personally like to approach it system by system, just so I could retain all the information and just kind of go about it in an organized way. I would answer the questions without tutor mode. Towards the end though, I started using tutor mode, which gives you the rationale right after you answer every single question. And I like that because it helped me to take notes faster. So with each question, I would try my best to answer the question, and I would go into the rationale and I would take notes on it and put it all in a document. Once I was finished with that system, so let's say I was finished with adult health respiratory, I would go back and I would organize all the notes according to topic, and I would go back in again and alphabetize all the topics so it would be easy for me to comb through. And then in the end, I would make a table of contents so that whenever I wanted to go back to a certain topic, I'll be able to find it really easily. So for example, if I was doing adult health cardiac, I would have subtopics within cardiac, such as MI, cardiac, chest pain, and within each subtopic, I would list every rationale as a bullet point. Now, everyone's NCLEX test is different because it's randomized, but I personally found the NCLEX section of leadership and management and fundamentals as a large portion of the questions that I received, which means I would have to find, out of the answer choices I had, which one was priority, or I would have to list my actions in order of importance. And I also found a lot of questions on my test about how to do very basic procedures. For example, how do you stop a nosebleed? How do you palpate a fundus? How do you take out a catheter? And the fundamental section of UWorld covers a lot of procedures. So the order in which I approached my UWorld questions was I approached it from the largest number of questions to the least number of questions. So if you go into UWorld and you click on all subjects, you'll see each topic is listed with the number of questions. And so out of all the subjects, you'll see cardiovascular is top of the list, followed by GI nutrition, skills and procedures, and prioritization. And I finished with an average of a 54% and at the 48th percentile. Honestly, whenever I scored above a 50%, that was like a win to me. Topics that I felt like I mastered, I would get 60, 70, even 80%. So I wouldn't really worry about it if you're finding yourself hitting 55, 60%, because these questions are really hard. And honestly, the NCLEX questions will not be as hard as the UWorld. I think more than content, I think the value of UWorld is that it teaches you how to think about questions, because my NCLEX questions were so different from my UWorld questions, but it was a lot of strategy and thinking about what the best answer is like. UWorld teaches you how to read the question carefully. Is the question asking you which of the following options is not true, which is true, or which is the best, like which do you do first? and the wording they use to ask all of those things can vary. So you really need to take your time to get used to those types of questions. If you guys are interested in a more in-depth video of exactly how I use UWorld to study for the NCLEX, then please let me know down in the comments. How I use Notion. So after I finished studying an entire system on UWorld, I would go into Notion and I would kind of use it as my flashcard tool. I would use it to actively recall information. So for example, if I had a bullet point on my previous document that said the therapeutic INR is between 2 and 3, then I would reframe it as a question: what is the therapeutic value of INR? And then I would make that bullet point into a toggle so that you wouldn't be able to see the answer. I enjoyed using Notion because I felt like I could just bang out a bunch of questions at the same time. It just felt faster to me, but this process did take me forever. So I wasn't really able to go through it multiple times, but I was able to go through my deck about 2 to 3 times. Studies show that even one round of active recall is much more effective than going through your notes again and just highlighting. You don't have to necessarily use Notion to study using active recall. You can do so by just even physical flashcards or using other websites or software such as Quizlet, Anki, even Microsoft Excel. Going through the studying on my UWorld and taking notes on Notion, I felt like a lot of my studying was taking place on my computer, and I'm just someone who likes to learn through tactile experiences. I really like to write out all of my notes. So what I ended up doing was I took all of my UWorld notes and I actually sent them to my local Staples store. So I was able to have a physical copy of my notes. So this is the physical copy. It's about 100 pages, and I also got it bound into like a book, so it was really easy to flip through, and I was able to go in and I would just be able to highlight it, just reread it, and just more interact with the notes in a more tactile way instead of just doing all of my studying online. And I did the same with my Klimek notes as well. I also listened to all the Klimek audio lectures, and I used the same approach as I did with my UWorld questions. So I would take notes while I would listen, and I would also make questions about them on Notion. Because I listened to his audios a little bit closer to my NCLEX date, I really enjoyed it. I felt like it was able to really synthesize the information I was learning on UWorld and in a more comprehensive way. And I really enjoyed that I was getting that audio experience of learning the content instead of just reading the UWorld rationales all day. I believe he has a total of 12 lectures, and so if you're tight on time, I would advise you to pick a topic out of the 12 that you feel like you're weak in, and then just study those. The average time I took on each lecture was about 1 to 2 hours to listen and to take notes. I took my first UWorld assessment 1 week before my NCLEX, and I received a 55% grade with a borderline passing score. To be honest, I was so stressed out when I first got this passing score because I was like, borderline? What the F do you mean borderline? My NCLEX is 1 week away. But after doing some research, I found out that the UWorld assessments aren't exactly the most accurate. Apparently the UWorld assessment can really be a hit or miss in terms of predicting your success. I also didn't like how the UWorld assessments weren't computer adaptive as the NCLEX is. And I heard that you can find computer adaptive assessment tests on a site called NurseAchieve, and I found a free code on their Facebook site. So I took 2 assessments on NurseAchieve, and one of them I got a pass, and on the second one I got a solid pass. Taking those 2 assessments were a lot more reassuring than the UWorld borderline pass. After 2 months of low intensity studying, I had finally received my ATT score, so I scheduled my ATT 1 month after the date that I received it so that I would have ample time to study intensively. So a little bit about my NCLEX exam. On the day of the NCLEX, I arrived to the testing center about 30 minutes before. I wanted to get there early so that I just had one less thing to be stressed about. When I got there 30 minutes before, I was the first one in the room. The check-in process of the NCLEX includes getting your wrist/palm scanned several times. You give them your phone and they put it in a Ziploc bag, and you lock up all your belongings in a locker. As far as I know, you can't bring anything into the testing area, including your watch, water, chapstick. Because the test itself was very individualized and I had gotten there really early, they had allowed me to actually enter into the testing area and start my exam 15 minutes earlier than the proposed time. In terms of the actual questions that I received on my NCLEX, I received a lot of prioritization questions. So For example, in a group of patients, which one would you see first? And most of the time, the answer to that question is pick the patient who is restless, anxious, agitated, or exhibiting any kind of altered mental status, because that's a dead giveaway that they are experiencing some kind of hypoxia. The only math question I got was super easy. The question was, if I had a 100 milliliter bag of fluids running and I wanted to run it for 30 minutes, what would I set the rate? And the answer to that is 200 milliliters an hour. But I would still go over med math, like dosing medications based on kilograms, as well as the drug factors for medication. Like I mentioned earlier, I got a few questions about procedures. Those questions were drag and drop questions, so I had to order the options in the correct order. I don't remember the exact number that my test stopped on. I think it was about 130 questions, because at the time that I was taking the NCLEX, the cap was 145 questions. And I heard that if you reach the end, whether that's by time or by reaching the end of the Q bank, that your chances of passing are pretty low. So not all testers will get this, but a random group of testers will be given a special research section. So this section is not part of your actual NCLEX exam, and it's optional for you to take it or not. Once your NCLEX is finished, it'll take you to a pop-up screen saying you're about to enter a research section, and that the section will take about 30 minutes. There's a theory floating around that if you were selected for this special research section, that there's a higher chance that you did pass the NCLEX, but Pearson Vue officially has denied this theory, but I personally still believe it. So by the time that I reached the section, I was so burnt out because I'd already taken about over 100 questions at that point, and so I was not willing to be there for another second to take these optional questions. And from what I understand, the purpose of these questions are to kind of test out a batch of new questions before actually entering it into the NCLEX. So when you see the screen, you'll see there's an option to just exit, and you can do so and it won't affect your actual NCLEX. It'll be pretty obvious because the layout looks very different from the actual NCLEX testing section. So personally, I skipped it, obviously, and I'm glad that I researched beforehand. Otherwise, I would not have seen that exit button, and I wouldn't have known that I could exit. The Pearson Vue Trick. So I took my NCLEX on a Friday, and I heard that you can do the Pearson Vue Trick 48 hours after you take your test, and I was worried that I wouldn't be able to do that because I took it right before the weekend. I think on the website it says it takes 2 business days, but obviously Saturday and Sunday are not business days, so I was worried. But I did check it on Sunday and I got the good pop-up. Apparently the trick is pretty accurate in terms of determining whether you pass. So if you got the good pop-up, there's a pretty good chance that you did pass, but don't fret if you didn't get the good pop-up, because there are more false negatives than there are false positives. I also wanted to add that all of my NCLEX notes that I took for UWorld and Klimek, I now sell on my Etsy shop that you can get to from the link below. I promise you that my notes are super organized. They're by topic and by subtopic. They're alphabetical. It has a bunch of graphs and pictures from UWorld, and I really condensed it as best as I could. I included some heart rhythms as well. I also included some math examples where you would benefit from seeing the actual picture instead of me typing it all out. It's basically the content version of UWorld. I wish I had this before I studied as well, because other books like Saunders felt huge and super overwhelming. I also have the Klimek notes available as well on my shop, and I've also included a discount code. So if you'd like, please go to my Etsy shop where you can purchase my notes. So again, just some key takeaways. 1, make sure you practice NCLEX style questions to get used to the format and the questions of the NCLEX. 2, focus on a lot of the prioritization questions of the NCLEX, as that personally made the bulk of my NCLEX questions. So that is it for my video on how I passed my NCLEX on the very first try. But even if you take it and if you fail, that's okay. One of the nurses that I started out with on the floor, she took it 3 times, and she's a great nurse. As well as the nurse that precepted me, she took it 2 times, and she's like the best nurse on my floor. So don't fret if you don't pass on the first try. I wish you all the best of luck. You guys were able to make it through nursing school. You can make it through just one more exam. If you're currently in nursing school and you're graduating soon, leave a comment below on when you're expecting to graduate and when you're expecting to take the NCLEX. I'd love to interact with you in the comments, so if you have any questions or any suggestions for future videos, please leave a comment below. Please remember to subscribe for more content and like the video. Thanks for watching!